Yesterday, we looked at the brief presentation of the ground from within the three initial sections of this text, the brief presentation of the ground, of the path, and of the fruition. And as was stated by Jamgon Lodro Tai, the presentation of the ground involves the presentation of how things are, the nature of things, and also the presence of bewilderment, or the manner of bewilderment. The verses of the text that we looked at yesterday were primarily, or obviously, concerned with the description of the manner of bewilderment. They showed first how in our bewilderment, we perceive as existing that which does not exist within the ground, and second, how through bewilderment we fail to see that which does exist within the ground. By implication, the first, showing how we perceive that which does not exist within the ground as existing, shows that the ground is emptiness. The second, which presented how we fail to see that which does exist within the ground, by implication showed that the ground is not just emptiness, but also inherent wisdom, which is what we fail to see or recognize. So, while showing the manner of confusion, these verses also pointed out that the true nature of things, the nature of the ground itself, is the unity of emptiness and lucidity. Now we turn to the next section of the text, which is a brief presentation of the path. In general, the path constitutes the process of gradually transcending the bewildered appearances of samsara and culminates with their eradication, which is what is referred to as the fruition or result. Now, the usual presentation of the path is of it as a process like, for example, traveling from one place to another. Here, however, it's pointed out that the path does not truly consist of going from one place or one state to another, but more of returning to the original nature, the recognition of which one has as yet failed to achieve. So, through relinquishing bewilderment and ignorance, one discovers that nature. And because the bewilderment is not intrinsic to the nature itself does not change. So therefore, there is no true moving from one place or one state to another. There is merely the return to what was always there, seeing it, however, without bewilderment or ignorance. The path has two aspects, as was written by the third Jawang Karmapa in his aspiration of mahamudra. The meaning of the ground is the two truths, beyond or without the extremes of permanence and annihilation. And this means to recognize that the ground is beyond any elaborated extreme of permanence or true existence, or annihilation or absolute non-existence. And he continues, the supreme path is the unity beyond extremes of the two accumulations without exaggeration or denial. Exaggeration or denial here means misapprehensions of the nature of things, that is to say, misapprehensions of the ground. When one asserts or believes that that which does not exist exists, that is exaggeration or superimposition. When one asserts or believes that that which does exist does not exist, that is denial. The path, therefore, is the process of coming to see the ground as it is, free of these two extremes. And in order to do this, it has two aspects, which are called the two accumulations. The conceptual or referential accumulation of merit, and the non-conceptual or non-referential accumulation of wisdom. The accumulation of wisdom refers to the process that begins with the establishment of the correct view correct understanding of the ground, and continues with the process of meditating upon this. Now, from among the two accumulations, it is the non-conceptual accumulation of wisdom that is of primary or central importance. Nevertheless, this accumulation of wisdom can only occur in the midst of the right conditions. The other aspect of the path, the conceptual accumulation of merit, is necessary, therefore, in order to supply or create the right conditions or environment for the accumulation of wisdom. This involves what is called the gathering of the accumulation of merit, which can be done physically, verbally, mentally, by means of one's wealth and possessions and so forth. Through doing this, one enhances and facilitates the accumulation of wisdom. So therefore, the path consists of the integration of these two aspects. That is the nature of the path. Now, what is presented about the path in the brief presentation of the path here in Saraha's Doha for the King is essentially the reason why the path works, why through the pursuit of the path one can achieve the fruition, which is realization. In the first verse we're going to look at today, verse 4, this is presented using three analogies. The verse says, "Though diverse rivers are one in the ocean, though myriad lies are overcome by a single truth, though darkness is manifold, the appearance of a single sun clears it away." The first of the three analogies is the analogy of rivers. It said, "Though diverse rivers are one in the ocean." This means that all rivers eventually flow into the ocean. This analogy represents the fact that although we undergo a vast variety of experiences or appearances produced by bewilderment, states of happiness, states of sadness, and almost infinite variations within them, all of these states, which are relative truths, have the same fundamental or single nature. Therefore, through the pursuit of one path, the bewilderment in its almost infinite variety of these states can be resolved. So the first analogy in the fourth verse is that of rivers and the ocean. The second analogy is that of lies and the truth. It says, "Though myriad lies are overcome by a single truth." And this represents the fact that no matter how many lies are told about something, once the truth is said or revealed, all of those lies, even if there are 100 of them, are disproven or shown to be lies or overcome. Now, this is, in one sense, an analogy, and in another sense, a statement about the nature of confusion and realization. Because regardless of how much bewilderment and ignorance we undergo, and regardless of how many varieties of bewildered appearances we experience in samsara, if the true nature of things is realized, because the bewilderment is bewilderment and therefore wrong or incorrect, the bewilderment is disproven and removed through the realization of the true nature. In other words, realization of what is true overcomes all possible misapprehensions about the nature. Now, from the point of view of the path of vastness, the path of the sutras, this means that through meditation on dharmata, the nature of all things, bewildered appearances can be eradicated. From the point of view of the path of profundity, the path of secret mantra, this means that in the same way, through meditation on the nature of the mind, bewilderment can be gradually eradicated as well. In short, what is especially significant here is that the path is not a waste because it actually brings one to fruition by the eradication of bewilderment. So that was the second analogy. The third analogy is the analogy of the sun and darkness. It says, Though darkness is manifold, the appearance of a single sun clears it away. No matter how dark a place is, and no matter how vast an area is covered by darkness, even an entire country, and no matter how long that area has been dark, even if it has been dark for thousands of years, once the sun shines upon it, the darkness is eliminated in an instant. Regardless of how long it has been dark, regardless of how vast an area of darkness there is, and regardless of how thick the darkness is, it is immediately eliminated by the sunshine. Now, this represents the relationship between that which is true and that which is false. Regardless of how much bewilderment we experience and how long we have been experiencing it, and regardless of its variety, sometimes bewilderment manifests as a state of happiness, sometimes as a state of misery. If we cultivate the path through meditation on the nature of things, this bewilderment in all of its variety, intensity, and having been there for a long time can be removed, and the nature can be seen as it is. In this fourth verse of the Doha, essentially Saraha has expressed, as a consequence of his realization and experience, his certainty that the path can remove ignorance. And he expresses this in order to assure his disciples who were listening that this can be done, and in that way to encourage them, therefore, to pursue the path. Now, in order to pursue any path, in order to get from one place to another, we need some kind of map or guidance, which is based on someone having actually experienced or traveled the path themselves before. For example, if you want to go from one city to another or from one state to another, you have to make sure that you know how to get there so that you don't take the wrong roads and the wrong highways and get lost. Usually, in order to prevent that, you use some kind of map. And by looking at the map, you learn what highways you should take and what local roads you need to take in order to get to the right highway. Well, we have a map for this road or this path. And the map was written or produced by the generation after generation of Mahasiddhas, all of whom began exactly like us, in a state of ordinary bewilderment, and through pursuing this path and experiencing it, achieved its result, the eradication of bewilderment. Therefore, they have described the path. And this map, which describes the path and enables us not to get lost while traveling it, has itself not been effaced or lost over time. Some people wonder if we still possess the actual and accurate instructions which will enable us to traverse the path. We do. These have not been lost or effaced or reduced over time. In fact, each generation of Mahasiddhas has added further clarification. The map that shows us how to begin the path as beginners and how to continue the path once we have gained some degree of experience and realization still exists. And we can find it in the books of instruction on the practice of mahamudra, and it tells us how to do the whole thing. The root of one's entrance into Dharma is faith and interest. And therefore, it was said by the protector Maitreya in his Ornament to Clear Realization, an explanation of the Prajnaparamita, that faith is like the ground. Saying that faith is like the ground or the earth means that if you want to grow anything, trees, crops, flowers, whatever, you need the ground, you need the earth. In the same way, faith is like the ground or the earth from which all of the qualities of the path arise. So therefore, from the very beginning, faith and interest in Dharma is very important. Now, all of you have naturally developed this. First, you understood enough about the Dharma to have interest in it, and through great exertion and austerity, you have pursued its practice and study. Nevertheless, we have to carefully look at the quality of our faith and interest. Interest can be stable, or it can be temporary or ephemeral. Now, even ephemeral interest in Dharma is, of course, good. Even so, it is produced by conditions, and when those conditions change, it can vanish. Therefore, we need to stabilize our interest and faith. And this is done by knowing the reasons for interest in and faith in Dharma. In order to do this, the practice that is recommended is the series of contemplations called the four thoughts which turn or change the mind. Through studying and contemplating these, you come to understand the benefits and reasons for Dharma practice and the defects of the absence of practice. All of this is clearly presented in the instruction on these contemplations. Thinking about these things very carefully is very important for beginners. But in fact, it is not only important for beginners. About these, the Buddha said, speaking of the contemplation of impermanence, which is one of the four thoughts, that just as the footprint of an elephant is the best footprint, the contemplation of impermanence is the best contemplation or perception. The statement that the footprint of an elephant is the best footprint means not only that elephant footprints are very large, but that they are a nice, round, uniform shape. They are not elongated and strange like human footprints. In the same way, the contemplation of impermanence is the best or most uniform state of mind. In the beginning, it is impermanence that inspires one's initial generation of faith and interest in Dharma. But after that, it is faith that it is impermanence that inspires and encourages diligence. For example, people often come to me and say, I'm really interested in Dharma, but I cannot make myself practice. Or sometimes they say, I used to practice a lot, but nowadays I just can't make myself do it. Or they may say, I really want to practice, but somehow I can't get it together. I can't find the time or circumstances. In all of these cases, the remedy for this inability to generate the diligence that you wish for or hope for is contemplation of impermanence. Through contemplation of impermanence, when you find that your diligence is flagging, it will increase. When you find that you're losing your faith, it will return. So impermanence is important from the beginning as one's initial inspiration, but also throughout the path as the means of overcoming loss of faith and loss of diligence. Therefore, contemplation of the four thoughts is important not only in the beginning, but continually throughout one's pursuit of the path. Through the contemplation of the four thoughts, one initially generates a stable faith, and subsequently, through the continuation of these contemplations, one is able to further stabilize, strengthen, and reinforce that faith while pursuing the path. Through doing this, the faith that is initially generated and subsequently further developed is not a casual faith or uninformed faith. It is informed. It is faith that is based upon having the correct information about the reasons for faith. It is therefore much stronger and much more stable. So therefore, one continues to perform the contemplations of the four thoughts throughout one's pursuit of the path. Now, the actual path itself can occur in two ways, and these are called the two paths, the path of method or means and the path of liberation. The path of liberation is mahamudra, and the path of method or means is the six dharmas of Naropa. In order to pursue the path of method, one has to begin with gathering the accumulations of merit and wisdom and purifying obscurations. This is done through the practices of going for refuge, the practice of Vajrasattva, the mandala, Guru Yoga, and so on. Upon completing the practice of Guru Yoga and receiving the blessing of one's teacher and lineage, one then performs the practice of a yidam. And through the generation stage practice and subsequently the completion stage practice itself, one achieves realization. That is the path of method. The path of liberation is the practice of mahamudra. And it begins with the stabilization of the previously unstable mind through the practice of tranquility, and then the pursuit of the actual practice of insight. But in order to assist and facilitate and enhance the main practices of tranquility and insight, even while pursuing the path of liberation, one still engages in methods for gathering the accumulations. That is to say, the preliminary practices such as going for refuge, Vajrasattva, and so forth, which were mentioned in the context of the path of method. These serve to greatly enhance the practices of tranquility and insight. When one's practice of tranquility is unstable, it can be stabilized through these practices. When one lacks insight, insight can be generated by these practices. Therefore, the path in either format conforms to what was said about it by the third Karmapa Rongjun Dorje when he wrote, "The supreme path is that of the two accumulations, without or beyond the extremes of exaggeration and denial." So in this way, the principal path is facilitated through the gathering of the accumulation of merit. Furthermore, although in their format the paths of method and liberation may appear distinct, that which is to be realized by them and that which is achieved through them, and furthermore the nature of the path itself, is the same. Since the paths of method and liberation have the same nature and lead to the same result, it is possible to practice either one of these in isolation or to combine their practice. My opinion is that nowadays, and especially in a Western context, the path of liberation, mahamudra, is going to be of the greatest benefit. The reason why I feel this is that if we look at the history of Buddha Dharma, and specifically at what happened in India, the country in which it initially flourished, when the Vajrayana tradition in particular was flourishing there, we observe that there appeared in India 84 individuals who are referred to as the 84 Mahasiddhas. If we look at their lives, we see that what they had in common was that all of them practiced and all of them attained realization and siddhi. But beyond that, their lifestyles varied tremendously. For example, some of them were in very high social positions. For example, the king Indrabhuti was a tremendously powerful, wealthy king who lived in a situation of great luxury and also had to fulfill tremendous responsibilities. While fulfilling his responsibilities as a powerful king and enjoying the luxury of his court life, he nevertheless was able to practice mahamudra meditation and achieve supreme siddhi. We can infer from this example that mahamudra therefore works when practiced in a situation of busyness, tremendous responsibility, and great luxury. Other Mahasiddhas were great scholars. For example, best known among them was the great Pandit Arya Nagarjuna, who was one of the greatest scholars ever to arise in the Buddhist tradition. Throughout his life, he composed a vast number of treatises which clarified aspects of the Buddha Dharma that had previously never been clarified. Among his compositions, he effectively refuted previous incorrect or mistaken scholarship. He did so effectively that even those he refuted accepted his refutations of them. He properly explained Buddha Dharma in a way that it had never previously been explained, and therefore caused a greatly widespread correct understanding of the Buddha's teachings. His influence was so tremendous that while it's obvious and understandable that the Buddhist scholarly tradition was completely different after Nagarjuna's time from what it was before that, even non-Buddhist scholarly traditions in India were radically changed or altered by Nagarjuna's writing. This is because the precision of Nagarjuna's reasoning was unprecedented, and therefore even those who did not follow his system of tenets or views were influenced by his methods of reasoning. So even though Nagarjuna was so busy teaching, composing, debating, and so forth, he still managed to achieve supreme siddhi in his lifetime, and he did so through the practice of mahamudra. It's therefore evident that mahamudra can be practiced effectively in the midst of a busy lifetime of scholarship. Other Mahasiddhas had common occupations, some of them even lowly. For example, the great Siddha Tilopa was a sesame seed grinder, and many of them had similar common occupations. And yet these too were able to practice mahamudra and through that achieve supreme siddhi. Now, if we look at our situation nowadays, we see that some practitioners are in high social positions with great responsibilities and living in great luxury. Others have ordinary occupations which keep them busy. Others are academics and scholars and so forth. The point of the example of the Mahasiddhas is that all of these types of people and all of these types of lifestyles permit the effective practice of mahamudra. And through that practice, through that meditation, all practitioners can definitely achieve supreme siddhi. I furthermore think that especially if the practice of mahamudra is combined with the practice of the preliminaries, it will go very well. That fourth verse has been the brief presentation of the path. And now we come to the third section, which is the brief presentation of the fruition. And this occupies two verses, the fifth and the sixth. The fifth verse gives the analogy for the state of fruition, and the sixth verse explains the analogy or gives its meaning. Essentially, what is being presented here in the fifth and sixth verses is that the fruition is a state beyond increase and decrease. The analogy used is the ocean. Although the water from the ocean is sublimated into the atmosphere, taken up by clouds, and then sent down again as rain, the ocean is not depleted through the sublimation of the water, nor is it increased through the rainfall, because the amount of water involved in the whole system remains constant or the same. In the same way, through the pursuit of the path, when one achieves its result, which is the qualities of Buddhas, because in essence the result is the correct and full realization of dharmata, the nature of things, or otherwise put, of spontaneously present co-emergent wisdom, because that which is realized is that basic nature as it is, which is unchanging, then the qualities of the fruition, like the ocean, are unchanging. That is to say, they cannot be lost, nor do they increase or decrease. I'm going to stop there for this morning with that sixth verse, and we'll use the remainder of the session for some meditation practice.